Okay, it is the top of the hour, 1 minute past actually. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Migrating to Microsoft 365 for Records Management. We appreciate you guys joining, and the first thing I want to do is just take a second and introduce our speakers. My name is Shayna Horka, and I work in product marketing here at Gimmal, and I am joined by our key speaker today, Solutions Architect John Kuvion. Now, before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping items to go through. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A section on your screen, and we will answer as many as we have time for at the end of the presentation. Unfortunately, since there is a large number of attendees, we cannot unmute you, so please, if you have any questions or comments, please use the Q&A section on your screen. There will also be at least one poll question that you will see pop up, so please keep an eye out for that, and all answers are anonymous. And as always, if you have any technical difficulties, please let us know so we can assist you. So to kick things off, I have just a couple of slides here to tell you a little bit about Gimmal and how we can help you achieve your information governance goals and take control of your information. Gimmal is a records, information management, and governance software company that was founded in 2002. Our mission is to help you achieve your information governance goals by providing solutions that help you balance the value your information provides with the risk it also presents. Whether you're trying to discover information in unstructured data sources, migrate from legacy systems, or comply with policies across multiple repositories, Gimmal can help you achieve your information governance goals. We have a client success team and a global network of partners that deliver solutions in conjunction with key partners like Microsoft and SAP. Gimmal's family of software products work together to let you create an efficient digital workplace. Our comprehensive solutions include migration, file analysis, electronic and physical records management, document management for SAP software. And for those of you who are not new to our webinars, you might know a slight name change. They are the same products, just with a more simplified name for your convenience. But without further ado, I will hand it over to John so he can get started with today's presentation.
Thank you, Shayna. So we're talking about migrating to Microsoft 365 for the purposes of records management. And a big part of that is talking about the legacy platform that you're migrating from. It's really important to understand what that environment looks like, what it encompasses, what you're doing with that environment so that you can help to plan where you're going to go when you move your data into Microsoft 365. So prior to migrating this data from the legacy platform, you want to make sure you analyze and discover what's going on in that environment. You know, things like where are things in the retention life cycle? Where are your retention triggers? Are you disposing of records today? What about categories or object types and metadata? How clean and accurate is the data that you have in the legacy platform? Is the structure that it's organized in going to be what you use in your target repository in Microsoft 365 and SharePoint Online, for example? Or do you need to spend time working on the information architecture to reorganize that information into something new for the go forward plan? Also, a big part of that is going to be around business process management. How much are you using the old platform for workflow or for business processes with integrated products? Those are all key topics that you have to take a look at. So we want to ask a quick poll here about if you have legacy platforms that you're considering migrating from. Yeah, clearly a lot of you do. It's very, very common that most organizations have not only one, but probably many. And I think if we had asked that question alongside this, you would see some responses regarding that. So let's move forward. Having some problems. Here we go. So let's talk about Microsoft 365. So if you've made the decision to move to Microsoft 365 and you're really bombarded with a lot of things to think about. You know, Microsoft 365 has a lot of compelling offerings, a wide breadth of services. It's like a Swiss Army knife. There's so much there. It can be overwhelming. You've got things like OneDrive and Office for content creation, Teams and SharePoint for collaboration. And you've got Power Platform for process automation, Security and Compliance Center for information governance. And then you've got newer products like Microsoft Syntex that people are looking to try to leverage as part of their solutions. So it can kind of be overwhelming. And the question is this enough? And you think about it, wow, well, isn't there enough there? But really, can it do what you need it to do from a records perspective? And that's the big question. So let's take a look at where we know Microsoft can help and where we know their strengths are. Clearly, Microsoft offers a great set of services and platforms for content creation and collaboration. We talked about Power Automate and the different applications like Teams, concurrent editing with Microsoft Office. Those are all great tools. Then you've got the new machine learning and artificial intelligence offerings, Project Cortex and Syntex, that can help you provide additional value for your content by adding context, tagging things that you may not have a lot of information on. Process management and reporting with the Power Automate apps, Power BI, those are all great tools. And of course, security and compliance, the ability to add labels to your content, do data loss prevention and e-discovery, all real compelling pieces of the puzzle that you should try to leverage to make the most out of your use of Microsoft 365. Now let's take a look at where they may fall a little short and might need a little bit of help. Although Microsoft does provide a good breadth of services and a good breadth of products, it might not deliver everything you need to replace your current legacy ECM solution, especially when it comes to managing records. Things like records classification. Most organizations have records retention policies and file plans that are hierarchical in nature, allowing you to nest classes underneath a hierarchy and to do case management where required for certain types of records. And that's not something that you really get out of the box with SharePoint Online or Microsoft 365. Retention and disposition. It's more than just retaining an item for a certain period of time. You've got to look at what is triggering the events going on with the life cycle of the content that you're managing. Different types of triggers like events or dates or business rules that start off the life cycle and allow you to span multiple phases of a life cycle. Things don't just sit there. They might go through multiple different phases and alternate phases as well. And then approval should be simple and easy to process as far as disposition is concerned. And then there's physical records. That's not really something you can do with SharePoint unless you customize a solution. Most organizations do still have some amount of physical assets that they need to manage, whether that's in a file room on site on their premises or in an external file warehouse where they might need to manage the information and use things like RFID tracking and barcodes, for example, to track those physical records. And then should your organization use SAP, wouldn't it be great to be able to archive all of those documents that SAP is creating and working with as part of their transactions into Microsoft 365 to make it more available for broader use and to increase the value of that information that's being tracked, in addition to now being able to integrate that into your records retention plans. So this is where Gimmal can help. First off, we talked about migration and the importance of migration strategy and understanding kind of where you're coming from and where you're going to. We offer Gimmal Migrate to cover this, to allow you to migrate in a point and click easy way from several different legacy ECM platforms to get your content in an efficient and fast manner into Microsoft 365. On the SAP side, we have Gimmal Link, which really enables Microsoft 365 as your document repository and increases access and value of that content that's part of those SAP transactions. Then physical records, we have Gimmal Physical, which allows you to manage those physical assets that you may still have while you're either working to migrate them into your primary electronic repository, or while you're letting them live off their life in physical format before disposition. And then finally, we have Gimmal Records, our flagship records management platform, which is going to allow you to have one centralized place to manage all your records with a hierarchical file plan, multi-phase life cycles, disposition, and workflow. And migration is not easy, and we've done, if you've watched our webinars before, we've done several on migration specifically to cover the challenges and recommendations and best practices around that. But there's some key considerations that can help make migrating easy, and that's listed here. Preparing where you're going to go, and it's part of understanding kind of where you're coming from. But the biggest challenge people have is making sure that the destination is going to fit what they want to move into that repository. And there's a lot that needs to be done. And a lot of people think it's just easy as just lifting the data up and copying it over to the destination platform. And really, it's not that quick, and it's not that simple. You have to spend the time to analyze what you've got and prepare the destination. And you've got to spend the time to really think about, what do I want this future repository to look like? Because your SharePoint online environment is not going to be the same as your legacy ECM platform. The structures are not the same. The way they work is not the same. So you want to take the opportunity as you're designing that to use best practices and make it work for the target repository, instead of just trying to replicate what you've got in the old ECM system. Keeping it simple. Don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to do it all in one step. It's going to take time. But if you plan appropriately, you can move through it and get it done pretty quickly. Timing and execution, it's all about change management. Users are going to expect to be able to walk in on one day and start using the new system. And you've got to really set expectations that it may take time, and there may be some changes, and you've got to communicate with your users. Change management is always a big part of our engagements with our customers, where we're doing migrations or even setting up customers to use platforms like M365 for records management going forward. Plan for validation and user acceptance. You've got to be able to track all of the data from the source to the destination and follow it all the way through. We call it a full fidelity migration, being able to know exactly where it came from and where it went, and account for its over that complete path. And then finally, understanding if there's going to be a need for implementing any workflow processes to replace what you had in your old line of business, in your old ECM systems, and any integrations that you may have with SAP or other line of business systems. Those can take a lot of time to analyze, to architect and design and build in your target systems, and oftentimes potentially could involve other third-party products being added in the mix if they are complex enough. Talking about SAP, Of course, we mentioned that we've got a product called Gimmal Link, which is going to allow you to move data from some legacy platform where you might be storing your SAP content into SharePoint so that you can actually enhance the value of that data and provide access to that data to others outside of your SAP users. From a user adoption perspective, you're not changing anything about the way people work with SAP, and you're not changing anything about the way people use SharePoint. You're simply pointing that content to be stored in SharePoint, adding value, adding access, and then you're also optimizing your platforms by potentially allowing you to eliminate and decommission a legacy platform which may be just being used for storage of this transactional content from SAP. Course records management, our flagship set of tools here for in-place records management with Microsoft 365 and more. So centralizing all of your records in Microsoft 365 is great. That's a big task, and sometimes that's going to take time. In the meantime, most organizations do have content across a lot of different repositories on file shares in legacy ECM systems or other SharePoint environments where there's records involved. And Gimmal Records allows you to manage all of those records in all of those locations, including physical, in one single interface. We will allow you to classify automatically, being our classification rules, all of your records into your file plan, help you retain that information based on multi-phase life cycles, lock or transfer, or decide how you're going to dispose of those records at the appropriate time with approval workflows for all your records across all your platforms. And our records management product is built for records managers. It's not an interface that end users are going to need to know how to use. Since people are working in SharePoint Online or other ECM platforms that we manage the records, we don't need to modify the way they do their work. Your records managers can now use Gimmal Records as one view for all of the records, one place to manage the file plan, the classification rules, your retention life cycles, and then in the end, your disposition approvals consistently across all your records. Of course, we talked about Gimmal Physical. In the same way that we can manage electronic records, we give you a tool to manage the full life cycle of all your physical assets as well, tracking and managing that securely and compliantly, providing things like warehouse and space management, ability to identify available spaces on shelves, bays, aisles, in storage facilities or in your organization's site as well. Asset tracking, we do RFID, barcoding, and we even can provide direct integration with third-party vendors for request and order management. So there's a lot there, and there's a lot to consider when you're doing this. So to recap some of what we talked about, plan your migration. Look at the data that you have. Do your analysis. Look at the functionality that you're using in your old system and make sure that you have a plan for migrating the functionality and the way that you use that system. Be realistic. It's not going to be overnight. It's going to take some time, and you'll be successful. Another key piece is that you've got to develop an information architecture to receive the data, and you want to take advantage of the new tools that you have to do that in an effective way. Don't try to recreate what you're doing in your old systems, your old platforms. Take the opportunity to go through your transformation, your digital transformation, and architect how you need that data to look, not only from a collaboration perspective, but being able to leverage the tools that Microsoft is going to give you to be able to manage it from a records perspective as well. Make sure that you're putting metadata in the right place. Make sure you're architecting your information architecture so that users don't have to put too much metadata, setting defaults on metadata where you can, and organizing your sites and site collections and document libraries in a way that support all of those objectives. Dispose of records before you migrate them. This is huge, because you don't want to migrate a bunch of data that should have already been disposed. So you should try, if at all possible, to take a look at what's in your old repositories and identify what may already be expired or could be disposed. And there are ways to do this to where you can use the tools to chop up your migration batches into categories or batches of data that can be put in different places as needed, to wait and hold off of migrating things that might need to be disposed of. Test your processes. Always test your processes. Don't try to pull the trigger on it before you're really ready. And then after you've got your plan set in stone and you're ready to go, execute it and follow your plan, and you will be successful. We've got one more poll question here.
Yeah, and I can go ahead and pop in, since I'll get started on the Q&A as well, so we can make sure we get all the questions answered. So for the last poll question, John went through a couple of different solutions with Gimmal, from records management, document management, and SAP, migration. If you would like a demonstration, any one of these solutions, go ahead and hit yes on that poll. And then we will get started with the Q&A. John, are you ready?
Yes.
You can actually push on to the next slide and the poll will stay there. So.
All right.
Great. So the first one we have is the functionality you mentioned that Gimmal applications have for records management available in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, or is the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center limited in records management functionality?
That's a good question. No, our product is separate from the Compliance Center, and what we have a product that runs in is a SaaS or an on-prem product that sits on top and leverages SharePoint Online underneath, M365 underneath, via connectors to manage the information there. And we supplement the capabilities that Microsoft has from a records perspective. But some of the shortcomings that I identified and some of the limitations are limitations of what you're asking about in the Compliance Center and the records functionality. There is functionality there, and depending on what you need to do, some of that may be okay for certain organizations, but things like hierarchical file plans and multi-phase life cycles are some of the things that we provide added value on top of the Microsoft solutions.
Great. And there is a question here about partners in South Africa, and I can go ahead and answer that. So we have a huge partner network, from implementation partners to technology partners. Off the top of my head, I don't know for sure, but I will follow up with this particular person via email and get you in touch with our partner representative. Okay, so can you do a migration from Windows 2007 to Windows 2016?
I'm not sure. Windows 2007, 2016. Are we talking about file shares? Can that person maybe clarify that in the...
Yeah, so we'll give them time to hopefully, oh, file shares.
File shares, yes. Yes, so we have tools that can help to migrate from legacy platforms, and additionally from the file system, so network file shares. So we can allow you to help you migrate content off the file share into Microsoft 365 and structure that as you need to on the way in. Those are always more complicated migrations, because your data on your file shares is typically less clean and less organized, and does not have as much metadata as you would in some of the other platforms. But we can help you do that. And we also have a product called Gimmal Discover, which is a file analysis and tagging solution to help with file plans. That's something we didn't really talk about today.
And the next one we have is, does it make a difference in functionality if we're using the government cloud SharePoint versus the commercial SharePoint?
No, it does not.
Great, simple question like that. Do you have the tools that can crawl file shares to identify PI/SPI, etc.?
Yes, yes, that's the tool that I just alluded to that we didn't really talk about today, and that's Gimmal Discover. And Shana mentioned it in one of her slides, but we didn't talk about it. And it actually, that's exactly what that's for. It's to crawl through it, and it can actually crawl through more sources than just file share. It can look through email folders and personal stores and different ECM systems, including systems like Box and Documentum and other systems to actually identify PII and provide you with reporting on that, and can actually tag that information to help you when you move it, so that it can be more valuable in Microsoft 365.
We'll do a couple more since we have time for them. Next one is, in terms of buy-in from decommissioning a long-standing legacy system, any recommendations on validating our records management goals for migration with those not involved with records management?
Yeah, oftentimes decommissioning an old ECM system isn't just about records. There's a lot of things, and the big one is ROI. How much is it costing you to keep that platform up and running? Because you're going through your normal maintenance cycles, your upgrades, support, and sometimes with really old systems, you might not even have people around that are capable of supporting them or fixing things that might need to be fixed. So there's a return on investment factor there. Gimmal actually has some pretty good ROI calculators that can be used with that. If another factor is that if you do have M365 and you are using things like SharePoint Online and are planning on that being your go forward strategy, think about what you're missing out on by not moving to the newer platform to leverage all of those enhancements for all of those things that we talked about that Microsoft is really strong at. You should be trying to leverage that. And then of course, on top of that is your older platforms are probably not as good from a records management standpoint as the newer platforms. So getting that moved over, of course, is in line with the rest of the things I pointed out.
And it looks like we have one more question and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. You mentioned cleaning up records environment for us in open text, so we don't migrate records that may be in need of disposition. What is the best method for this?
Yeah, that's always a complex task. You have to have the information in the system to be able to do that. But where you are using a platform for records management, if you are using the records management components of the platform that you're using, then you should try to use those tools to help dispose of things before moving them. There's also other ways to go about this. So where you're not using the records management components of those older tools, then you can leverage the migration tools to be selective about what's migrated. I think I alluded to this when I was talking earlier. Having a way to filter out things that are older than a certain date, for example, or save them for a different migration because you may not want to move them. Having the ability with your migration tools to only migrate certain aspects or certain pieces of the repository instead of doing it all. And then of course, if you absolutely have to, make sure that you migrate all of the information you can, and from a metadata perspective, so that you can then, after it's in the new platform, apply retention to it. And if the dates are such that they need to be disposed, then you can dispose of them easily in the target or the future platform. Take the opportunity to clean up and ensure that where you're going, the information architecture is in line with your records management needs, your disposition needs, so that you can do that.
Wonderful. Well, we will go ahead and wrap it up there. There was a question about the recording of this webinar for a couple of people who joined late. We will be sending out a recording between 24 and 48 hours in the form of a thank you email. So please keep an eye out for that. The link of the recording will be in that thank you email. But if anyone can think of any more questions, we actually got through all of them. Both of our information, contact information is up there on the screen. You can email either one of us. Or John, if you go to the next slide, you can always send us an email. It might be a little bit easier to remember, info@gimmal.com, or visit www.gimmal.com to learn a little bit more about the products that we reviewed in today's presentation. So we hope to see everybody at our next webinar next week, next Wednesday, called Why Metadata is Superior to Folders. But thank you everybody for your time, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.